Welcome to Growth Decoder, a podcast that digs into those pivotal moments that real entrepreneurs face every day to find out how they rose to those challenges. I'm your host, Mahfuz Chowdhury.
I can also say that if I hadn't made that mistake and gone ahead with that project, who knows what would have happened? Maybe we wouldn't even be in business.
Today on episode 5, we are talking about growing pains. The growing pains business owners feel as they transition from a small to medium-sized organization. Growth is exciting, but it can also be scary. It's a great problem to have. You're excited that more work is coming in, but how do you maintain the quality of your service, your customer care, and your brand? And if you have your mindset on expansion, how do you make sure you have the cash flow to support it? Someone who knows these questions very intimately is Drew Galvin from Pure Image, a home theater and automation company in Western Canada that is leading the way in innovative technology and design. Pure Image has recently expanded beyond Vancouver into Whistler and Victoria as they become a major player in their niche market. Welcome to the podcast, Drew.
Thanks very much, Mahfuz. Thanks for having me.
It's my pleasure. I'm really excited for this interview, especially as I've got to understand more and more about your story, Drew. It's become very evident to me that you have a lot of experience, expertise, and a lot of wisdom to share in both extremities that businesses go through, some of them being the early stages of challenges that they're experiencing, maybe some uncertainty along the way and not sure what to do, to the other side, where you've been able to break out of it, rapid growth, seeing a lot of things folding in place, but at the same time, the challenges that come with that, with maintaining quality. I want to start at the beginning, and I would love to start at the very beginning when your company was being built from back of your car, from what I hear. And I understand that there's been some challenges with getting your first few clients. There's been some challenges with figuring out how to show up to the market. Can you talk a little bit about what the early stages of the business look like and paint a picture for the audience?
Yeah, I mean, I'll do my best to remember all those years back because that was 18 years ago now, and but certainly, some dear stories that come to mind. Back in the day, at that time I was 20 years old. I was in college, but things weren't moving too quickly for me in college. I had decent grades coming out of school, and but not really a clear idea of where I wanted to be. At the time, or in the 2 years previous, I'd been working at Future Shop, and at that time, I was a home theater salesperson and selling TVs and all the rest of it back then. You would pay $3,000 to $5,000 for a big projection television that two people would have to lug in and plonk down on your floor, and then we would have a 50-inch Samsung or Pioneer Plasma up on the wall in the home theater department, and they would it'd be like 15, 20 grand, and people would just sort of say, "Oh, that's cool," and walk past it and decide what else they would want. So one evening, actually, a fellow came in to the store and basically said, "I want that. Give me that thing. I want it installed. I want it all set up in my home." And, I go running around the store. It was sort of a Wednesday evening or something, a quiet night in the store. I go running around, and sort of the evening manager was there. "Hey, where would I get the mount for this? Like, who do we call to do this? This guy's standing in the back. He's got his credit card ready to go." And, we were panicking and running around. And long story short, I lost the sale because we did not have any of the solutions to give this person, and so unfortunately we had to say, "Oh, we'll get back to you," and that was the end of that. So that's what gave me the idea of, hey, surely there should be a company that can just have all of the solutions. I had this idea, and I was thinking, okay, let's maybe move forward with this. And so I actually pulled the trigger on it. I went and, my dad helped me kind of do the research, and I still remember it was about $250 to start a company in BC, and went ahead and did that and incorporated. Meanwhile, working away at Earl's, and you got to have a little bit of luck along the way. And my manager at the time said, "Hey, we've just received our 5 Panasonic plasmas to install, and guess what? The company that we use is 3 or 4 weeks booked, and I want these things ready for the Grey Cup. Drew, if you can make this happen for me, if you can promise me you'll have it done in time for the Grey Cup, then you can have the job." And so, so began the adventure.
Yeah.
And,
that's amazing.
and away we went. So, managed to make the deadline and managed to make it happen, obviously through calling in favors from friends and, this person's electrician friend and this and that. We made it happen. And that luckily triggered more work. Earl's had other locations and other needs, and so we got going there. And meanwhile, the nature of Future Shop at the time was people would get moved around to other stores. They would keep things fresh. They would, people would get promoted and become a manager here and there. So a lot of my friends from the old store were now in other stores. And so I printed cards and circulated
that
that
around.
And again, just very, very old school beginnings. At the time, I was operating out of my 1997 Acura Integra, which if you packed everything perfectly, you could fold up a little ladder and you could have all your tools and connectors. And, quickly a year went by and it was time to make the big plunge and buy a work van, really, really risky, big investment at the time. And invested in a work van and deckled it. And again, bit by bit, here we are today.
I love that. And, we talk about maybe serendipity that Earl's had a need that you just happened to fill. But I like to think there was a lot that you did to make them aware that you're the guy for the job, right? For them to give you that opportunity. So I imagine that there was a lot in the way that you were using word of mouth and other early stage marketing strategies to build some awareness for your business. What would you say was critical for some of your early customer acquisitions? What allowed you to get out there?
Certainly hitting the pavement. There is no substitute. And even to this day, I was doing all of the basics like printing cards, visiting electronics stores. It wasn't just limited to Future Shop at the time. And that's how I met a lot of people as well, distributing cards, making sure people knew that I was available. But it wasn't even just limited to that. If anything, as an entrepreneur, I would champion the need to be creative. And I got creative. There were times where I had a friend who would be able to scale poles, for example, like actually short story. One day we had some signs printed and we stuck them in the lawn in one of the nice subdivisions near where we lived. And shockingly, I got 2 phone calls from those signs stuck in the lawn in 1 hour. And then I had no more phone calls because the signs were taken away. They were gone. So rather than give up that idea, I had a friend who scaled things for a living. And so I actually got him to scale some telephone poles for me and put those signs a little bit too high for them to easily be taken down. And so
That's
came
great.
more phone calls.
Yeah.
Again, sort of early, so we were talking now 2007, about 2 years in, certainly shifted focus to, hey, how do I show up first when someone searches this on Google? And it became quite interested and quite obsessed with, how can I show up readily when people are searching the right terms? And thankfully gained a decent understanding of that. And that has been very strong for me as well. But, if I weigh everything, there's absolutely no substitute for marketing. You must do marketing, but don't neglect one side or the other. Like you absolutely must do the ground game as well. And even to this day, you have to do that.
Can you talk a little bit about the next chapter that comes around, which is you're starting to get business, you're starting to get attention. People are starting to talk about you online. How do you manage those relationships to make sure that the feedback and the word of mouth is very, very positive in the market?
Yeah, and this side of things is almost more old fashioned business ethos where taking care of every client, and it's a heck of a small city. Speaking of Vancouver. Essentially, you just as a small business, you have to make sure your clients are happy, and no matter what, if you've got one that's unhappy, you need to take care of them, because simply, you're one bad Google review away from someone looking elsewhere. Mm-hmm. That said, I mean, it's not necessarily just about Google reviews. Like, again, Vancouver is a tiny little city where everyone knows everyone. And you never know if you leave a customer unhappy, you never know when that's going to come back and get you for something else. And ultimately, so we subscribe to the fact that like we must leave every client satisfied. There is not a single person in Vancouver that we've ever left high and dry. And again, I think that's been a big thing for our business. Again, it's like, I can think of an example where I had a difficult client, and there was maybe a chance to say, you know what, like maybe let's just call it a day here. Mm-hmm. But we struggled through that and kept everybody happy and made sure our side of the job was done and made sure that they had nothing but good things to say. Good thing we did, because about 2 or 3 years later, we were up for the biggest contract our company has ever been up for. And that person was one of the decision makers on that contract. And so if we had to just let that fester or like not dealt with that in a professional and conscientious way, we would have very much lost out on.
Yeah, it would have come back around.
Yeah, the biggest one that we ever got. Yeah.
Right. What is your definition of good customer service? A lot of businesses, that's usually their go-to thing, right? It's like, what makes you unique? We're better at customer service. Mm-hmm. What would you say you do that is something that other businesses are struggling to do in the customer service area?
Yeah, I mean, speaking of our industry specifically, our industry is actually a very difficult industry to provide good service. Let's compare, say, an electrician or something like that. If an electrician wires, a light switch, chances are that light switch is going to be good for the next 20 years. When we hook up an Apple TV or something like that, an update gets pushed. We're OS 16 now or whatever it is. That in our industry plays havoc on stuff. Like the number of times where we essentially like set up a system, everything is perfect for that day, that month, that 6 months, and then something gets an update. And breaks something down the chain, it happens all the time. And unfortunately, that's a huge challenge for our business, but also is a moat once you get to a certain point. Now, imagine that you're out there and say you're a 1 or 2 or 3 person crew. You're relying on today's work, right? So I'm pulling wires through a home or retrofitting someone's attic or something. You go and you work your 8.5, 9 hours on site and then battle traffic and get home and have dinner. And then you check your phone and there's, 4 people with their Apple TV is not working.
Oh, no.
So that is a real challenge in our business specifically. And as you grow, that only gets worse until it gets better. So we, thankfully, our business, we're approximately 45 people now. And as we've grown, we've been able to build a service department. And we have a service department of 6 people, and they are all excellent technicians and conscientious people. Mm-hmm. And this is an area now where we can excel. Whereas, if somebody calls, we're there. Like there's a human ready to pick up the phone and answer the question. There's so much stuff that we can do remotely now, thank goodness. And if we can't solve it remotely, we'll book you right in to get to visit. And our service backlog is not more than a couple of days, which is amazing. So that service burden and that service problem has actually turned into a massive opportunity because unfortunately, as you guys have correctly picked up, this is a hard business to scale in, and in creating the service department, we're able to actually attract new customers that potentially they dealt with a 1 or 2 or 3 person company that can't pick up the phone or isn't responsive or isn't able to solve their problem because they are frankly just too busy doing their next job. People find us, and that our one of our biggest revenue generators is now our service department. So it's kind of a lemons to lemonade type scenario.
I think it's an exceptional business decision where I think a lot of businesses would have made that decision of saying, hey, let's get more skilled labor to be out there, to do more of the work, to get out there and complete more to drive revenue. Yet you kind of took a moment to look back and say, let me devote some of the team members towards better customer service so that the brand carries through the reputation while the business is still growing. And I think that's a great business move right off the bat. When you think about great experience, which is what we're talking about right now, talk to me a little bit about the team building aspect. Recruitment must be a big challenge when you're hitting these type of numbers. And for every one person that joins your team, they could make a significant, both positive or negative impact on what the brand is going forward. What is the process that you go through in your recruitment just to make sure that you find the right fit to continue building your team?
Yeah, I mean, as I'm learning over the years, it can make such a difference, and certainly I've had a lot of good advice over the years. And one of my advisors, very early on in the game, said, Drew, you're in a people business. Your team is going to define your own destiny, and certainly, you can only do so much. So it was spelled out fairly clear. I have been lucky enough to have a few very good mentors, and we can certainly get into that. But yeah, absolutely. Our industry is a people business, and there are only so many people in the market. Certainly, my nature is to want. I'm a very caring person, and when I hire someone, they say don't use the thing as family or whatever, because it is different than a family. I personally look at it very much almost like a sports team. I grew up playing soccer and am very passionate sports fan. And and that was a good experience, because certainly I've been on teams that feel good and teams that feel bad, and whether I did it consciously or subconsciously, I think those lessons were learned. Certainly, a big thing is you're spending so many hours of the day working with people, working with your colleagues, that an important thing is that you have to like them. So one of my funny little hiring rules is don't hire someone that you wouldn't hang out with on the weekend.
I like that.
Call that like a weird, call that weird or whatever. It probably is. But certainly hiring likable people is a very good start. Certainly, again, I think it comes across when you genuinely care about people. It comes across certainly in your turnover of people, which in our case is extremely low. And, even if it means paying a little bit extra, paying a little bit more to get that top talent, they are not more expensive. They actually save you or make you more money than that typically.
Value makes up for it.
Yeah, absolutely. And that doesn't say to, just go out and abandon any structure and spend like a drunken sailor on wages. But at the same time, recognize that you should pay for talent, and it pays to do that. So
I love it. And Drew, you're on the Growth Decoder, and we're going to spend some time dissecting this growth period of yours, this incredible transition that happened during the last decade or so. I want to first start with the moment that you felt like you were ready to make that jump and start growing the business. I'm curious, was there a moment? Does it not exist? You just have to leap in with the belief that you can get there. What happened in your business during those growing phases that made you realize that you can expand and start doing greater things here?
Interesting. Well, again, in our industry, we work with a lot of successful people. And so I get a chance, and over the years, I've gotten a chance to get to know these people and ask them questions that, come to mind at the time. And I remember asking one of my clients once, who owned a national company, was one of the country's largest companies. How many times did you risk it all? How many times did you basically have to roll the dice and say, I'm comfortable. I have a good living here. Things are generally good. If this was the end of the story, this would probably be okay. How many times did you have to do that to get to a national company of your size? And he said 3 full times.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And I think at that stage, when I heard that advice, or at least that answer, we were at only 3 people. And, we were sort of very much just operating at a ground level. We had a couple of work vans and, worked out of a storage unit and things like that, like a really, really humble setup. And, I don't think it was that long after having heard that where we actually decided, hey, let's go into let's go to the next level. And so actually, funnily enough, that storage unit that we were working out of, it was actually not even by choice. They were developing the site, and so we had to move anyways. And so what do? Find another storage unit or like get some digs. And so that kicked off. So for me, that was 2014, and that happened to walk by this place every day in Yaletown that I thought was kind of cool. Needed a little bit of, actually quite a lot of fixing up, but I inquired about it, and as soon as I knew it, we were signing up and we were going into that place, and so that sort of kicked off, throw the comfort away stage 1, and that took us from being very comfortable to very, very uncomfortable, and that in all honesty, that phase almost put us out of business. As a bit of a greenhorn, I went into that place and completely underestimated the scope and size of the task to improve that building to the point where it would be, what we wanted it to be. So went well over budget on the improvements there. And then that only got us to a point where we had a functional office, and it was another major thing to equip it with all the latest technology. That was another major investment. Yeah. So interesting. I mean, in retrospect now, that almost put us out of business. It definitely put some gray hairs on my head and some lines on my forehead. And it was a good lesson in going into a situation like that. It was a good lesson to really understand the capital requirements of going to that next level. I can't say I regret it, because we wouldn't be here talking if we didn't do that. But again, that put major stress on the company at the time. And it was a full, when you make I don't want to say a mistake, because it turned out to be a good thing. But when you do make a miscalculation like that, unless you're really lucky, it takes a while to get out of that. So, I was in major stress between, say, 2014 and 2017, just fighting my way through that situation, which ended up obviously, again, being something that was good for the company long term. It set us up. It gave us a presence, an exposure. It gave us a lab to basically build and test and live with the technology. But again, it took a long time to get into a position where things were comfortable again. Yeah. And that was, in the end, a very good experience, because I'm certainly not going to make that mistake again.
Yeah. Talk to me about other roadblocks. If we get into the cash flow side of things, how do you maintain great cash flow during this growth phase?
You need to have someone really good in that position, unless it's you, depending on the size of your business. But certainly at our size now, our accounting and finance department, I have absolutely phenomenal people, and I would not be able to sleep at night if I couldn't see pretty much down to the minute how much we're up or down for the year. I don't think I could sleep at night if that was the case, because obviously there's so much money in and so much money out at any given time that if you don't have that side of things organized and very, very tight, you could get taken out pretty quick, right? So I would highly recommend making sure that you've got either a grounding in it yourself and allocate the time to do it well, or even better yet, so you can focus on growth and doing the business, having someone excellent in that position that you trust and use the technology as well. Like some of the accounting software out there now, again, using some of the technology that is available, it gives you a phenomenal perspective. Again, they say, we haven't spoken about AI or anything yet, one of my favorite topics, but the amount of intelligence that is built into some of the softwares now, everything from cash flow projections to just overall perspective and view of, like, again, I could literally tell you how much we're up or down this year.
Amazing.
By opening my laptop and going, 2 seconds basically. So that's critical. And the busier the business gets, the more important that becomes. Because yes, if you don't have understanding of that, it's a big risk.
Speaking of perseverance and the resilience that you hold on to, one of the parts of your stories that I admire the most is how you were able to navigate when you were down to your last $1,000. Can you talk a little bit about, first of all, painting the picture of the circumstance of what you were going through during this time? And, speaking of slaying a monster, can you talk a little bit about how you overcame that and came out better on the other side?
Yeah, I mean, that was definitely the toughest period. And that all came during the reno of the building and, sort of 2014, 2015, but all the way, that's sort of when it hit, when the bills just would not stop coming to, fix things up or whatnot. I was literally down to my last $1,000. And that was not just like my $1,000. That was like my overdraft's $1,000.
Oh.
So, it was looking pretty dire. I think just about everyone would have written us off at that point. Thankfully, certainly I had family that said, it'll be okay and things like that. Not that I come from a rich background or anything. I certainly don't. Both my parents were teachers. So, middle class or whatever. But, that was how dire it got in that period of time. And, as I said, it was just, you're not quitting, you're going to fight and you just have to. You have no choice, right? Mm-hmm. And so just working insane amount of time. If it meant getting a job done, I would work until whatever time it took. And then I won't discount the fact that you need to have a little bit of luck. Yeah, I was probably pretty darn lucky to have not gone under at that point. But again, you certainly you can't quit, right? You just can't.
I've also admired how much you don't take your foot off the gas even when things are going well. Innovation is obviously part of your business model. And you talked a little bit about AI, but even the expansion, when we look at Vancouver, Victoria, Whistler, you've continued to look at other areas, whether it's from what you offer to where you offer it. Can you talk a little bit about what decisions need to be made or what research needs to be completed ahead of time in order to make sure that the innovation is going down the right direction?
Yeah, certainly. I mean, if the question relates to, how do you decide whether going into a new market is a good idea? Certainly, it's nice if you can kind of put your toe in the water a little bit. There's not much to stop you from turning on the advertising in a new market and just gauging what you get back. Fortunately, in our case, the growth into Whistler and Victoria has been fairly organic. A lot of our clients have sort of asked us to go up there. I know, especially in Whistler, it's a pretty lively market, especially in our line of work. There's a lot of beautiful homes being built. There's a lot of action happening in the Whistler community. So that, we sort of had a bit of a foothold already, which was very nice. Certainly, again, it goes back to finding the right people. I was lucky enough to find some really good people up there and to sort of start building that team. And then again, once we gained a little bit of momentum, we were able to go a little bit further and get a small office and things like that. And obviously the story in Whistler for us continues to evolve. In Victoria, again, same thing. Definitely had the right person that was actually moving over there, and certainly had all the attributes to say, hey, this person is the right person to lead this market for us. We had less momentum there at the time when that decision was made, but again, turned on the marketing. And although again in Victoria, the marketing that I typically subscribe to isn't really doing as much as it is in other markets.
Interesting.
Whereas, so again, which is like where I go back to,
Sure.
like, when someone tells you this works or that doesn't work, I mean, it's really like you can obviously listen to that, but you won't know until you try. So yeah, certainly in Victoria, it was more about, hey, we've got this person that's moving into this market. I think we can build around that. And then we've actually been quite lucky in Victoria to gain some excellent work.
Sometimes the challenges that you experience can also appear when you least expect it, especially when we saw the pandemic years come up, which we know impacted many businesses, whether it is from a customer base to getting access to resources and supplies like they used to. What would you say your circumstance would look like during the pandemic?
That first month to 2 months was really, really tough in my position, because it's like, you're trying to do the right things for your people, for your business, for everybody's health. You don't want the business to go under, obviously.
Yeah.
So there was just so many question marks at that time. And then, again, the pandemic kind of went through its like peaks and valleys of like, okay, it's really bad right now. It's not so bad. It's summer, it's winter. But it was just constantly just reinventing the wheel.
Sure.
and figuring it out. That said, and this is probably a good one for people. Obviously you'd be crazy to not say that was a time of crazy adversity.
Mm-hmm.
And much like, again, I don't think it's quite that bad right now, but interest rates are high. If you turn on the news, it's doom and gloom. But one of the things that actually a good friend, again, a friend told me is, and this was when the pandemic was just kicking off, he said, the times of adversity are actually the most opportune times to make moves and to grow. And I sort of took that to heart. And I mean, the pandemic for us, I decided I'm gonna keep pushing. And an interesting thing that happened during that time was talent became available. Whereas, certain companies pushed forward, others sort of like ducked and covered. Some companies laid off talent that you would never get in any other situation. And our industry is a funny industry where it's very hard to get talented people or experienced people. Some companies sort of turtled a little bit, and we were able to pick up talent that we wouldn't have normally done.
Right.
So here I was faced with this decision of like, all this weird stuff's happening, but look at who's available.
Do I bring them in? Yeah.
Yeah. And in the end, I listened to my friend and I pushed.
You really capitalized.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so, in the pandemic, we actually grew by quite a few people, and the people that we were able to add were absolute gems that we wouldn't have gotten any other time. So, that in that respect, that sort of kicked off a period of like significant growth. Meanwhile, as sort of the pandemic settled in and people sort of got used to it and were like, okay, throw on a mask and come in and do your thing and I'll wait upstairs or whatever. Things started to flow a little bit better.
Sure.
And obviously, the government programs, which, we made use of for a short period of time. But very quickly, I recognized that could become a bit of a I don't know, like almost like a false. You could build a business falsely around that, and so I was quick to get off of that as soon as we possibly could, and we were off it very quickly.
Right.
So yeah, we were able to grow throughout that period. And then, as you know, back to the luck thing, guess what people were doing? They were spending more money on their homes. If you could do something that made someone's home more comfortable or more entertaining or more enjoyable to be at, people were investing money. Mm-hmm. And they were also, you know, they weren't going on their big trip to Europe or whatever. And so they had maybe a little bit of extra money to spend on their homes. And
looking into home projects, you know, upgrades.
Yeah. So as the pandemic wore on, that side of things became more and more evident, and we were actually able to experience some really good growth and record numbers over the course of those years.
I love to hear it, Drew. We talked about the early chapters of your business, and then we dived into chapter 2, which we imagine there was also many, many roadblocks that you overcame. Can you talk a little bit about chapter 3, which is going in to where you are today, as well as the upcoming future? What's coming up for the business?
Awesome. Well, yeah, absolutely. And it's certainly one of the reasons why we're sitting here today. So, you know, as I sort of explained, we went into our showroom and that was in Yaletown in 2014. There was sort of 3 years of trial and tribulation before things even had a glimmer of improvement. And then towards the end of, towards the middle of 2022, another massive change happened, which, yeah, I suppose we could call it chapter 3. So by this time, we were sort of entering the, you know, high 30s, low 40s in terms of personnel. We had a lot of business going all over the place. We were doing hotels. We were doing all kinds of different things. And the reality was we had outgrown our downtown showroom space, which had a little bit of warehousing in the back, but it was like absolutely like sardines back there. And even on the office side of things, like, you know, every seat was starting to get taken and we had a lot of people kind of, you know, it was a very, very busy showroom, which in one way was good. Like in many ways was good. There was, you know, certainly, you know, that's where the culture of our company was built and whatnot. But we were just starting to burst at the seams. So I had been dreaming of expansion in something that basically would be like a warehouse operations and staging facility. And I had started working with my friend who was a commercial real estate broker looking at places sort of out in the suburbs. And, you know, I was looking for a good size place that the company could actually purchase to be sort of the long-term home for that. Because again, if you can picture it, you know, we had have our place in Yaletown. We've got our sort of street frontage and then the alley in the back. We had big 18-wheeler trucks like pulling up, delivering skids of Lutron shades and big TVs and all kinds of stuff. And, you know, people would be in the alley honking their horns, get out of the way, come on, let's go. So, you know, the need was becoming more and more acute. And we were actually in the middle of, again, a company's, to date, one of our largest projects, which was some work up in Whistler for a hotel chain. And I sort of could see it. You know, that one is the one that's going to sort of break the back of our logistics side of things. Like there's just too many things that are going to be showing up. And thankfully that was a big project where we could see sort of a year out, like, hey, when that is coming, when that's happening, we need more space. So was working with my friend who's a commercial real estate broker and you know, had him on the hunt. And, you know, finally he found, and we were looking for a while, finally he found, you know, what I would call the right forever home for our company, a nice mix of warehouse and office that could sort of house the different departments and allow us to sort of receive, stage, pre-assemble, design, test, all of that stuff, all under one roof. So that's sort of, that's when Pure Image and Canadian Western Bank became a thing. And, you know, certainly they, when it came to, you know, preparing a mortgage and again, in this case, I was determined to not make the same mistake I made in 2014, which was going into a new adventure undercapitalized. And so, you know, on we went with that. We went forward with the new building and so kicked off the new challenge. And this place was built in the 90s. Certainly I like things to look nice and clean and modern. So kicked off another mini reno, not as bad as the first one, cleaning things up, painting everything, getting, warehouse racking set up, getting desks, computers, you name it. And then bringing it up to the standard that when our clients or, builders or, industry partners roll through there, it's also got to look nice, and clean. So that started things off. And so that was summer 2022. So here we are in October 2023. So, what is that? 15 months roughly. Very
fresh, very exciting time in the journey.
Absolutely. So, again, a whole new set of challenges.
Right.
How do we maintain the culture? I personally can only be in one place at one time. How do we maintain the culture? How do we maintain the energy? How do we communicate? If some people are working from the downtown location and people are working from the new location in the suburbs, how do we operate? What kind of protocols are in place for making sure gear is where it needs to be on the right day? Where do people launch from? But so it's been another year of challenge, which I enjoy. To be frank with you, it was getting a little too comfortable and too easy, or I shouldn't say too easy, but just like, I really like to I like to feel like I'm fighting a battle.
Really gives you that purpose.
Yeah, some purpose for sure. And, more than a year on now, that place is all cleaned up. We have all of the operating procedures in place to make sure that everyone is stitched together and communicating and has the information and the things that they need. And, to my surprise, actually, initially with that building, I thought, okay, it's pretty good. It's pretty much what I want. But the warehouse versus office ratio, maybe if in a perfect world, I'd maybe want a little bit more warehouse versus a little less office. I don't think these offices are going to be that busy. Well, boy, was I wrong. Those offices are full of people because, again, being in the suburbs, a lot of my team members appreciate not having to battle traffic in the morning and going the opposite direction or whatnot. So actually, those offices have been quite lively, and it's been the opposite problem of being like, hey, guys, remember this awesome place downtown that we've got? But yeah, we've managed to strike a balance. And again, back to the piece about having really, really good people. Again, that has shone through yet again in this next phase. And again, having this is taking our company to the next level. Again, when we're assembling our racks and pre-staging everything, it looks like NASA in there. Like it's, the guys assembling racks has got every single little connector and little piece to make it nicer or more reliable. We're in there experimenting with technologies like 3D printing and all kinds of development there. And again, it's just, I'm watching the quality of our finished product go up and up and up, which can only be a good thing. And so just yet again, another exciting time for the company.
Drew, your growth is an inspiration to myself and many businesses that are tuning in onto this podcast. Thank you very much for being on the Growth Decoder and sharing your incredible journey. I have no doubt that it's going to help many people with the transitions that they're going through as well. I really appreciate all you do, and best of luck.
Appreciate it, Mahfuz. Thanks very much. Appreciate it.
That was a great conversation with Drew Galvin of Pure Image. My first big takeaway from today's episode is the importance of hiring good people. Growing your business means growing your staff, and spending a little more to hire the best talent is a decision you won't regret. The second big takeaway is how important it is to seek out successful partnerships. As your clients prosper, more business will get sent your way and your business will grow as well. And the final big piece is to be open to advice. Find people you trust because they may steer you in a direction you hadn't even considered. If you haven't already, make sure to subscribe to Growth Decoder wherever you get your podcasts. You can also visit www.cwbank.com/podcast for more about Pure Image as well as the other businesses and topics featured on Growth Decoder. I'm your host, Mahfuz Chowdhury. Thank you for listening. Growth Decoder is brought to you by Canadian Western Bank with production by SJC.